Today we're going to focus on 2 ways to type in Chinese, both of which have their strengths depending on the situation and your preference. These are the pinyin and handwriting input methods, and with an understanding of both, you can be confident when typing in Chinese. If you'd prefer to read instructions, there's a link in the description below for the corresponding article on the How to Learn Languages website. The first method we're going to look at is the pinyin input method. Now, the pinyin input method makes typing in Chinese quick and easy. By typing the pinyin for the words and phrases you want to write, you'll be able to select the appropriate characters. It's comfortably the fastest way to type in Chinese, and is the most commonly used method. Whilst pinyin has been essential for making Chinese functional on digital devices, it's not quite as fast as typing in English, as you still need to select the appropriate characters. Given that Chinese only has 409 different sounds, excluding their tones, you'll often have to select a character from a lengthy list of homophones. Fortunately, the most relevant characters appear first, but sometimes you'll have to scroll through a few rows if you're after a less common character. As for the setup, the following instructions are for iPhone and Mac, but the process is similar across most devices. It's something along the lines of select Chinese Simplified or Chinese Traditional, and then a pinyin QWERTY keyboard. Over months and years, software updates may cause some of the steps outlined below to involve slightly different names or buttons, but the general process should remain more or less the same. So to start with, on the iPhone, go to Settings, then General, then Keyboard, and then Keyboards. At the bottom of the Keyboard section is an option to add new keyboard. Select either Chinese Simplified or Chinese Traditional, depending on your preference. Once you select Chinese Simplified or Chinese Traditional, you'll have the option of adding different types of Chinese keyboards. To add the pinyin keyboard, select pinyin QWERTY, and then press Done in the top right of the screen. You can now use the pinyin QWERTY keyboard when typing on your phone. To switch from your current keyboard to pinyin QWERTY, hold down the globe icon in the bottom left of the keyboard. Whilst continuing to hold down on the screen, you can select the keyboard you want to use. The pinyin QWERTY keyboard for Chinese Simplified will be listed with its Chinese characters that you can see here. The pinyin QWERTY keyboard for Chinese Traditional will be listed with the traditional characters, which you can also see here. As for setting it up on the Mac, go to System Preferences and then Keyboard. Go to the Input Sources tab, click on the plus icon, and a list of different languages will appear. Select either Chinese Simplified or Chinese Traditional, depending on your preference. Once you select Chinese Simplified or Chinese Traditional, you'll have the option of adding different types of Chinese keyboards. To add the pinyin keyboard, select pinyin Simplified, or if you selected Chinese Traditional, pinyin Traditional. Press the Add button. You can now use the pinyin keyboard when typing on your Mac. To switch from your current keyboard to pinyin, click on the keyboard bar at the top of your screen, which will likely say some form of English or ABC Extended. When you click here, a drop-down list of all the keyboards you've added will appear. Select the pinyin keyboard. You can quickly toggle between your usual keyboard and the keyboard you've most recently selected by tapping the Caps Lock button. As for using this keyboard, there's a few things worth noting. Now, first of all, you don't have to worry about tones. Simply type the pinyin of the word you'd like to use, and the characters with matching pinyin will appear above. For example, if you type ni, then all the characters with that pinyin will appear along a bar above the keyboard. Simply select the character you were looking for. The most relevant characters will appear first, making it quick and easy to use. When you're after a less common character, you can press the downward facing arrow on the right side of the bar that's above the keyboard. This will open a drop-down list of all the characters that match the pinyin you've typed. When typing on a Mac, the bar with the characters will appear on screen, just below where you're typing. On a phone, you can just tap the relevant character on the bar, but on a Mac, each character will be numbered. You just need to enter the number of the character you need. A great feature of the pinyin keyboard is that you don't have to input one character at a time. You can type the pinyin of entire phrases and select the relevant phrase from the character bar. Instead of just writing ni, selecting the character for ni, and then moving on to the next character, you could type out the whole phrase you want to use. If you wanted to ask, "What is your name?" you could type "Ni jiao shema mingzi," and then select the relevant phrase from the character bar. If you'd like to speed up the process, you can just type the initial sounds of the most common words and phrases. For example, if you typed "nh", then "ni hao" would automatically appear in the character bar. If you typed "xxn", then "xie xie ni", "thank you", would appear in the character bar. It even works for longer common phrases. If you wanted to say "nice to meet you", you could type the pinyin initials HGXRSN and then select 很高兴认识你. For pinyin, it's useful to know how to type the letter U with a diacritic mark, or an umlaut, I guess it's most commonly called. And you'll see it in the pinyin for characters like nu, the character for woman, for green, which is lu, and travel, which is lu. Each of these three contain the U with a diacritic mark above. So to type this pinyin, you have to use the letter V on the keyboard, so the V functions as the U key, essentially, because the U key is already taken. So for example, with the three characters just mentioned, to type their pinyin, you would type NV for nu, LV for lu, and LV again for lu. Sometimes you may want to type out pinyin for its own sake, such as when making notes. So to include the relevant tones, simply hold down on the relevant vowel key, such as the letter A, and you'll see a bar appear giving you options for which accent or marking, tonal mark to add to the vowel. On a phone, you can just tap the relevant marking for the tone you're after, whilst on Mac you'll need to press the number that's been assigned to that marking. When using the pinyin keyboard, all the tones will be available to select from the bar that appears when you hold down on the vowel. To keep the pinyin and its tone as the typed output, press the spacebar. This will make the keyboard move on from suggesting relevant characters for the pinyin you've just typed. When typing with an English keyboard, the only tone that won't appear in the bar is the third tone. To type this tone, switch your keyboard to ABC Extended. Once your keyboard is set to ABC Extended, you can hold down the Alt key and then press the V key, and this will cause the third tone to appear. Once the third tone appears, just select the vowel you want the third tone to appear above. So moving on to the handwriting input method. Now, this method involves drawing the characters on your smartphone with your finger. It's a lot slower than typing with pinyin, but it can be helpful if you don't know the pinyin for a character. It's also a useful way to get extra practice writing Chinese characters, even if it's difficult to write clearly with your finger on a smartphone. So in terms of setup, the following setup instructions will again be for iPhone and Mac, but the process is similar across most devices. Again, it will be something along the lines of select Chinese Simplified or Chinese Traditional, and then handwriting. Over months and years, software updates may cause some of the steps outlined below to involve slightly different names or buttons, but the general process should remain more or less the same. To set up the handwriting input method on the iPhone, go to Settings, then General, then Keyboard, and then Keyboards. At the bottom of the keyboard section is an option to add new keyboard. Select either Chinese Simplified or Chinese Traditional, depending on your preference. Once you select Chinese Simplified or Chinese Traditional, you'll have the option of adding different types of Chinese keyboards. To add handwriting, select Handwriting and then press Done in the top right of the screen. You can now use the handwriting function when typing on your phone. To switch from your current keyboard to handwriting, hold down the globe icon in the bottom left of the keyboard, and whilst continuing to hold down on the screen, you can select the keyboard you want to use. The handwriting option for Chinese Simplified will be listed in its Chinese characters, which will look like this, and the handwriting option for Chinese Traditional will be listed in traditional characters and will look like this. To set up handwriting on the Mac, go to System Preferences and then Keyboard. Go to the Input Sources tab, click on the plus icon and a list of different languages will appear. Select either Chinese Simplified or Chinese Traditional, depending on your preference. Once you select Chinese Simplified or Chinese Traditional, you'll have the option of adding different types of Chinese keyboards. To add the handwriting function, select Handwriting Simplified, or if you selected Chinese Traditional, Handwriting Traditional. Press the Add button. You can now use the handwriting function when typing on your Mac. To switch from your current keyboard to handwriting, click on the keyboard bar at the top of your screen, which will likely say some form of English or ABC Extended. When you click here, a drop-down list of all the keyboards you've added will appear. Select the handwriting option. Now, in terms of using the keyboard, once you've selected the handwriting function, a blank space will appear where there'd normally be a keyboard. You can use this space to draw the character you're after, and your device will then suggest the most relevant characters based on what it thinks you've drawn. Although it's hard to write clearly with your finger on a small area of a smartphone, the handwriting function is usually very good at figuring out which character you've drawn. Once you've drawn the character, simply select the right one from the character bar above the drawing area. Over the coming weeks and months, there'll be more videos like this posted on this channel to help you learn Chinese, as well as various other languages. If you'd like to look at some other free resources on the website, there's a resources section, and that gets added to weekly. There's general advice on language learning, and there's a tab specifically for Chinese resources, focusing particularly on films you can watch to help improve your Chinese, and each of these has links to relevant videos and articles that will add more context to the film you've watched. Adding this context helps you to remember the phrases you've come across, and it just makes the whole process more enjoyable. If you'd like more detail on how to learn Chinese, specifically Mandarin Chinese, there's a How to Learn Languages guide, How to Learn Chinese. The guide goes into lots more detail, covering important aspects of the language, such as pinyin, tones, and characters. It's a way for you to have everything you need in one place, with links to lots of useful resources and a plan laid out for you. Most of the resources are also free, so it should make learning Chinese a much more affordable endeavour for you. There's also a detailed section on the history of the Chinese language and an in-depth guide on how to learn Chinese characters. Thanks for watching this video. I hope you found it helpful, and see you next time.